The city's upper ring glowed like a suspended sunrise as Eric Hale, the human billionaire everyone whispered about but few truly knew, stepped out of his ground skimmer with the tired weight of someone who carried more memories than money ever solved. His maid Lyra walked half a step behind him, quiet as always, a gentle presence in a world that rarely felt gentle to him anymore. Eric trusted her more than he trusted any board member, any investor, any friend who came after the wars, because Lyra had stayed when his world had broken, and even now her silence wrapped around him like something safer than walls. He didn't notice the three alien women until they blocked the glass corridor entrance. Their clothes shimmered with desert-woven fabrics, their jewelry glowing in soft ultraviolet patterns that only non-humans usually wore. They stood too close, their eyes scanning with the kind of hunger that wasn't malicious but desperate, the sort born from a life running from someone else's law. The tallest one bowed stiffly, her throat luminescent with shifting stripes, a biological sign of fear and a plea for mercy layered together. "Human Hale," she whispered. "We request temporary aid under Intersector Protection Law 14. We have no funds, no shelter, no clearance to pass the city without a resident sponsor. Please, allow us to purchase only what the law permits for survival." Eric froze, not because strangers asked for help. Humans were legally required to support displaced aliens, but because their eyes carried something deeper than desperation. There was a story there, a dangerous one, and he didn't yet know if he wanted to be tangled in it. But Hale blood had always been weak against suffering, and he was too human to pretend he didn't see them. He sighed and handed over his ID chip, the universal payment link encoded with more wealth than most planets ever touched. "Only necessities," he murmured. "Food, transport, medical gels. Nothing else. Stay within limits or law enforcement will trace this to me." They nodded fast, too fast, like they feared they'd lose the chance if they hesitated, and then they vanished into the marketplace corridor. Their steps echoing like secrets fleeing into light. Eric rubbed his brow, already regretting it, not because of the cost, but because of the feeling he couldn't name. Something in their eyes had mirrored something in Lyra's, a loneliness carved into years rather than moments. Lyra stood still beside him, her hands folded, her gaze lowered, but he could feel her heart shifting in the silence, feel her breath catching like she wanted to speak yet swallowed the words back down her throat. She always did that, carried storms quietly, and he had never known how to ask her about them without breaking her calm surface. They continued into the atrium, but Eric kept glancing at his wrist display, expecting a notification for basic purchases. Bread packs, hydration tablets, low-cost transit chips, the usual things aliens on the run grabbed to stay invisible. But minutes passed, then 20, then 30, and the display stayed silent. That silence felt heavier than any alert. Lyra noticed his tension before he admitted it. "Sir," she whispered carefully, "are you worried?" "I don't like it when silence feels intentional," he answered, his voice softer than he meant. "They should have purchased something by now. Even a frightened traveler needs air ration codes." Lyra nodded slowly, but her eyes dipped to the floor again, and he caught it. Something flickering inside her, a tremor of guilt or fear or something painfully close to heartbreak. He watched her, not with suspicion, but with the instinct of someone who cared more than he ever said aloud. "Lyra," he asked gently, "what's wrong?" She shook her head, but not in denial, in collapse. Her fingers trembled as they pressed against her apron, and for the first time since he had hired her 3 years ago, she looked younger than her 20-something years, fragile, breakable, as if one truth might shatter her completely. Before she could answer, 3 chimes pulsed across Eric's display, not the soft alert of standard purchases, but the sharp triple tone of a major transaction, one that exceeded the regulated emergency limit. His chest tightened as he tapped the notification. The holographic slip bloomed upward, shining brighter than the atrium lights. The 3 alien women had bought exactly one item, one single, devastating item. A princess-class rescue certificate. A legally binding, galaxy-recognized human contract worth more than small nations. A document used to free highborn captives, hunted royalty, or political prisoners with bounties that could ignite wars. Eric's heart split open, not because of the absurd cost, not because they had violated the law in the most dangerous way possible, but because of the second line on the slip, written in soft human calligraphy. Purchased under authorization of Lyra Hale. His maid, the girl who never raised her voice, never asked for anything, never even kept her own wages for herself, had used his wealth to buy a contract that could rewrite destinies and invite warships to his doorstep. He turned to her slowly, the world bending in silence around them. Lyra's eyes shimmered with tears she had held for years. "Sir?" she breathed, voice cracking like something ancient breaking free. "I'm so sorry, but I couldn't let her die. Not again. Not because of me." The atrium air thickened, emotions tangling with fear as Eric stepped toward her. Her confession wasn't just a mistake. It wasn't even betrayal. It was a wound she had carried before she ever met him. A wound connected to an alien princess whose life now rested on Eric's name. And in that single moment, Eric realized the three alien women hadn't been thieves. They had been messengers, carrying a truth Lyra had buried so deeply she nearly suffocated beneath it. Somewhere in the stars, a princess was waiting, hunted, chained by law, and Lyra was tangled in her fate so tightly that saving her had become the only thing Lyra wanted, even if it cost Eric everything. Eric didn't know whether to feel anger, sorrow, or fear, but one emotion rose above all others, a painful, human ache in his chest that whispered a single truth. Whatever story Lyra had been hiding was about to pull him into a battle far larger than money, pride, or law could define. And destiny had already chosen its battlefield. The moment the rescue certificate shimmered into existence above Eric's wrist, the entire atrium seemed to inhale, as if the building itself sensed a law being broken under its own lights. Lyra stood frozen in front of him, her shoulders trembling, her breath shallow, her eyes shimmering with a truth she had never shared, and for a heartbeat Eric forgot the danger, forgot the law, forgot the staggering cost as he stepped closer to her with a gentleness that contradicted the chaos unfolding. Around them, "Lyra," he whispered, not in anger but in something softer. "What did you just save?" Her lips parted but no words came, only a shiver of memories passing behind her eyes like ghosts pacing in a narrow room. She pressed a hand to her chest as though she feared her heart would fall apart inside her ribs, and when she finally exhaled, her voice cracked under the weight of a story she had carried alone for too long. "She isn't just a princess by title," Lyra murmured, voice frayed and trembling. "She was my friend before the wars began, before the laws changed, before humans were even allowed on her world. I failed her once, and they took her because of it. I thought she was dead, but 3 days ago someone sent a message to me, only a fragment, only one line, but I knew her voice. I knew she was alive and enslaved under her own royal crest. I knew she was begging for rescue." Eric felt the words sink into him with a heavy, sinking ache. It wasn't betrayal. It wasn't theft. It was grief wrapped around loyalty so fierce it had driven Lyra to risk everything. She stared at the floor, her tears slipping down her cheeks silently, and Eric saw the part of her he had never understood. The part that moved gently not because she was timid, but because she was hiding the weight of a broken past. Before he could speak, a soft hum vibrated through the air, a tone that echoed like the heartbeat of a coming storm. His wrist display flickered again, showing a golden crest expanding across the hologram like a blooming wound. "Princess Class Rescue activated. Claim pending, awaiting warship response." Eric's breath stalled. He felt the blood drain from his face as the last word echoed in his thoughts. Warship, not patrol, not diplomat escort, but warship. The kind that moved with ancient alien authority and arrived only when a royal life was threatened or a claim was disputed. "You triggered a royal summon?" Eric whispered, but the words held no anger, only shock and the cold weight of inevitability. "Lyra, a warship will come for her, or for us?" Lyra shook her head desperately, stepping toward him with a frantic urgency in her voice. "They won't hurt you, sir. The law protects sponsors. You're a humanitarian figure across sectors. They wouldn't dare risk a political fracture. Unless she's being hunted by her own people," Eric countered quietly, and the way Lyra flinched told him everything. The truth wasn't that Lyra had saved a princess. The truth was that she had saved a fugitive princess, a girl whose crown had become a target, whose name had turned into a sentence. Before the weight of that could settle, 3 shadows moved swiftly toward them. The same alien women approached again, but this time their desperation carried a sharper edge. Their pulses glowed violently along their throats, the universal sign of imminent danger. The claim has been detected by enemies, the tallest alien whispered urgently. We must leave this building, sensors will track the certificate's origin, and they will come for you. The human must prepare for confrontation. Lyra stiffened beside him, but the fear in her eyes wasn't for herself. It was for Eric. Her hands hovered near him as if she wanted to shield him from something far larger than either of them. Eric straightened, his voice low and steady despite the storm rising inside him. I want answers before I run for my life. Who is she to you, Lyra? What did you keep from me? Lyra swallowed hard and lifted her gaze, letting the truth that had lived behind her silence finally break free. I wasn't always a maid, she whispered, her voice trembling like a dying flame. I was part of the human cultural exchange before the war. I lived among her people, studied their traditions, learned their laws. The princess wasn't royalty to me then. She was just my closest friend, and when the uprising started, she tried to protect me. She hid me while soldiers tore through the palace. She helped me escape, and because she protected me, they captured her instead. The words hit Eric like a blade forged from guilt and loyalty. He imagined Lyra younger, terrified, clinging to a princess who defied her own crown to save a human. A debt like that didn't disappear. It carved itself into the bones. I thought she died, Lyra continued, her voice breaking completely. I've lived with that guilt every day, every time I served you tea, every time I washed dishes, every time I stayed quiet. It was because I didn't deserve anything more, not after abandoning her. Eric stepped closer, each motion slow, deliberate, as if approaching someone standing at the edge of a cliff. Lyra, you didn't abandon her. You survived. That's the same thing to me, she whispered, tears falling freely. A soft tremor vibrated the floor beneath them. Then another, and another. The tallest alien woman looked toward the sky windows, her pupils narrowing into a predatory slit. The warship is arriving, she breathed. But it isn't hers, Lyra gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. No, they can't reach her first. Please, sir, we need to leave. If the hunters come before the rightful vessel, she'll be killed to prevent rescue. Eric felt something ignite inside him then, a spark of human defiance, a heat that rose when danger threatened the people he cared about. Wealth had never protected him from heartbreak, but now it was about to pull him into a fight he hadn't asked for yet couldn't turn away from. He looked at Lyra, really looked at her. The fear, the guilt, the hope trembling beneath it all, and he knew he couldn't let her carry this battle alone. Lyra, he whispered, his voice steady despite the distant thunder of an approaching vessel. We're not running. She stared at him in disbelief, her breath caught between terror and relief. We're going to rescue your princess, he said. And if fate wants a battle, then it chose the wrong human to challenge. Outside, the sky split open with the roar of alien engines. Destiny had arrived, and Eric Hale stepped toward it without looking back. The sky above the city fractured into burning streaks of violet as the first alien vessel descended, its engines humming with a pitch that made human bones vibrate. Eric felt the tremor roll through the atrium floor, a ripple of fate spreading under his feet. And in that moment he understood that whatever life he had lived until now was gone, replaced by a path shaped by Lyra's trembling confession and the princess whose name he still didn't know. Lyra stood beside him, her breath uneven. Her fingers curled tightly against her apron as though trying to hold herself together. Her eyes were wide with fear but filled with something deeper too, something fragile and unbearably human. She glanced at him with a silent question, one that carried guilt, hope, and the terror of dragging him into her past. He answered with a steady look, firm and reassuring. The kind of look that told her he wasn't stepping back from this. Not now. Not after seeing how deeply this wound had carved itself into her life. The alien women circled closer, their movements sharp, their eyes constantly shifting toward the sky windows where lightning-like flares danced across the clouds. The tallest one, Acria, spoke in a low voice filled with urgency. These aren't royal markers. These are hunter signals. If they reach the princess before a lawful warship, she will be erased from all claims. Lyra's breath cracked into a soft sob. They'll kill her. They'll do it quietly, So no law can trace the blood, sir. Please, what do we do? Eric clenched his jaw as his display flickered again, showing a swirling crest he didn't recognize, runes curling like living flames, the mark of a faction not allied with any known government. His heart pounded with a strange mix of anger and fear. Anger because someone was hunting a girl connected to Lyra so deeply it shook her to her core. Fear because he was realizing this wasn't just a political split. This was personal, ancient, and wrapped in secrets that had bled from one world into another. We leave the city, Eric said at last, though his voice felt heavier than he expected. If these hunters track the certificate's origin, staying here traps civilians and makes us sitting targets. Acria nodded, but her throat glowed with unstable pulses, a sign she disagreed with the simplicity of his plan. They don't track purchases the way humans think. They track intention, fear, memory. The rescue certificate is alive. It echoes the emotional signature of its claimant. Eric frowned. You're saying they can track Lyra's feelings? Every royal rescue carries soul thread technology, Acria answered. It binds to both the sponsor and the emotional anchor of the request. Lyra's knees weakened, her hand grasping the nearest railing as if the world had tilted beneath her. She's tied to me, isn't she? Even now, even after all these years. Princesses of her line imprint deeply, the second alien whispered, her voice hushed with awe and fear. If you loved her, if she loved you, the thread survives, even in separation. Eric watched the truth strike Lyra like a wave, watched her shoulders fold inward, watched her tears glisten as the weight of her past settled fully on her chest. It wasn't guilt alone that had driven her to save the princess. It was love, not romantic, not childish, but a bond carved in war and shared survival. A bond that had been torn by violence and years of silence. Eric stepped closer, placing a hand gently on her shoulder. His touch steadied her, grounding her panic, calming the storm rising inside her. You don't have to explain everything yet, he whispered. I'm with you, whether you're ready to tell the whole story or not. Lyra's breath trembled, her eyes closing for a moment as she leaned into his steadiness. It wasn't intimacy. Not yet, but trust. Fragile, earned, and deeper than words, a violent crack ripped across the sky, pulling them back into the moment as a dark vessel descended. Its hull covered in angular symbols that rippled like living shadows, the entire building dimmed under its silhouette. That's not a warship, Acria breathed. That's a claim interceptor, illegal, ancient, and used only by factions that deal in stolen nobility. Lyra's hand clutched Eric's sleeve, her fear no longer contained. Sir, please, we need to move. They'll come straight to you. They'll want leverage. Eric nodded slowly, his instincts sharpening. The glass corridor leading to his private skimmer felt suddenly too far away, as if danger had stretched the building itself. They started moving together, a tight group weaving through the crowd. Lyra kept close beside him, her breaths short and shallow, every shadow making her twitch. Every step carried the weight of someone who had already watched a disaster unfold once and refused to let it happen again. Eric walked beside her with a protective gravity, his focus locked on every corridor angle, every echo, every unfamiliar face. Behind them, the alien vessel landed without sound. Too quiet, too deliberate, too predatory. The air tasted metallic, charged with energy that made Eric's skin prickle. Acria hissed under her breath. They're scanning for the emotional imprint. Lyra stumbled, gripping Eric's arm as a wave of dizziness washed over her. The holographic rescue certificate pulsed faintly from her pocket, reacting to her fear. They're reading me, she choked out. I can feel it. They're pulling on the thread. Eric caught her before she fell, one arm around her waist, steadying her trembling body. Stay with me, Lyra. They don't get to take anything from you again. Her eyes fluttered, tears spilling freely. I didn't want you dragged into this. I didn't want your life shattered because of a promise I couldn't keep. And yet, Eric whispered, holding her closer, I chose to be here. Ahead of them, the skimmer bay doors flashed warning red, meaning the hunters had infiltrated the system. Acria turned sharply, her voice low and final. They're inside the building, human hail. They're coming for your maid. Eric lifted his head, the tension inside him rising like a storm breaking open. Something old and fierce awakening beneath his calm surface. "They're not taking her," he murmured, a quiet promise sharpened by human resolve. Not while she still shook under the weight of a past she had buried. Not while a princess was waiting somewhere in chains. Not while destiny pulled threads that connected Lyra's life to his own in ways he didn't yet understand. Outside, alien footsteps echoed through the corridors like the whisper of an approaching war, and Eric Hale stepped between danger and the trembling woman beside him, as if fate had already decided he would. Eric tightened his grip around Lyra as the corridor lights dimmed one by one, shutting down in a falling sequence that crawled toward them like a predator closing its jaw. The hum of the alien interceptor vessel pressed into the building's bones, a vibration that seemed to pulse inside the walls, inside the air. Even inside their chests, Lyra's fear made the rescue certificate flicker with unstable light, and that flicker acted like a beacon, guiding the hunters closer with every tremor of her heartbeat. Acria moved ahead, her senses stretched wide, her throat glowing with sharp pulses of alarm. "They've sealed the exits. They're forcing us toward the center of the building to corner the human claimant." Eric felt Lyra tense beside him, her trembling worsening as the emotional thread binding her to the princess tugged violently, as if someone else were pulling from the other end, someone not meant to touch that bond. "Sir," she gasped, holding the front of his coat as if it were the last solid thing in a collapsing universe. "They're trying to sever the thread. If they break it before the rescue is completed, she dies. I feel it. I feel her slipping." Eric steadied her again, the way he had every time her knees weakened. His voice low and fierce with a protective intensity he didn't bother to hide anymore. "They won't break anything, I promise you. Not while I'm standing between you and them." But promises couldn't stop what came next. A ripple of sound swept through the hallway behind them. Not footsteps, not voices. Something deeper, like gravity itself shifting. Acria froze mid-step, her pupils widening to a terrifying size. "They brought a thread cutter," she whispered, her voice shaking with something close to reverence and horror. "Those devices were banned centuries ago. They can erase bonds between royal lines and their protectors." Lyra choked out a breath. "If they cut the thread, she won't just die. She'll cease. No memory, no trace, nothing left to save." Eric didn't understand alien technology fully, but he understood what it meant to fight for a life that mattered to someone he cared about. The emotional certainty in Lyra's voice struck him harder than any weapon could. Then the lights ahead of them flickered in a pattern. 3 flashes, a pause, 2 flashes, a signal, a warning, or both. The corridor walls shifted, revealing an opening that hadn't been there seconds before. A maintenance passage hidden from public maps. Acria tilted her head, listening to some frequency humans couldn't detect. "Someone inside the building is helping us?" Lyra blinked through her tears. Confused? "Who?" Acria's throat glowed with uncertainty. "The signal signature. It resembles royal coding, but distorted, altered. Like someone is using corrupted authority." Eric didn't wait for clarity. He guided Lyra through the opening. The group slipping into a narrow, dark chamber filled with humming conduits and vibrating light cables. The air was hot, metallic, tasting faintly of plasma residue. Behind them the wall sealed again, erasing their entrance as if they had never passed through. "We can breathe for a moment," Acria said softly, but even she didn't believe it fully. Lyra leaned into Eric, her hands pressed to her temples as pain radiated in waves through her. "They're hurting her. I can feel it. They're tearing at the bond." Eric cupped her face gently, forcing her to meet his gaze. His voice steady despite the storm crashing around them. "Focus on me, Lyra. Not the pain. I need you here with me. Right now." Her breath steadied, not fully, but enough that she didn't collapse. But before relief could settle, the chamber lights lit up in a soft, eerie glow and a figure materialized through a holographic panel across from them. A woman, tall, with hair like liquid silver and eyes that shimmered with the exact same pulse as the rescue certificate. She looked ethereal, half-present, as if projected from a distance no human could imagine. Lyra's breath caught in her throat, her entire body freezing. No, no, that can't be real. Eric turned sharply, confused by the fear and longing mingled in her voice. Lyra, who is she? The holographic woman tilted her head, studying Eric with an expression that carried ancient authority and heartbreak. Her gaze then softened as it drifted to Lyra. My beloved guardian, she whispered, voice trembling with both joy and pain. You still breathe. Lyra collapsed to her knees, tears spilling like rivers, her hands reaching out but unable to touch. Ariel, princess, I thought you were gone. Eric froze, shock rooting him in place. He stared at the hologram, at the princess who shouldn't be able to transmit through a sealed hunter zone. Her presence was impossible, illegal, dangerous, but she wasn't here to be saved. She was here to warn them. Ariel's image flickered violently, her words twisting with static. They used me as bait. Lyra, you must not come for me. The hunters. They want you, not me. The words hit the chamber like a violent impact. Eric's heart slammed into his ribs. Why would they want her? Ariel's gaze snapped to him, regal and sharp even in distortion. Because she is not what you think. The chamber darkened, red lights pulsing as the hologram grew unstable. She is air, Ariel gasped. Not I. You were never my guardian. I was yours. Lyra shook her head violently, her voice breaking. No, that's not true. I'm human. I'm nobody. You were the princess. Ariel's final words cut the air like a blade forged from destiny and grief. Your blood carries the true royal lineage, Lyra. They hid you among humans to protect you. I was only the decoy. The hologram collapsed in a burst of light, leaving the chamber echoing with stunned silence. Lyra stared at nothing, trembling as the truth shattered every piece of the life she thought she knew. Eric knelt beside her, wrapping his arms around her as she broke in his embrace. He didn't know what it meant yet. He didn't know how deep this went. But one thing was suddenly clear. The hunters were not after a princess. They were after Lyra, the rightful heir to a throne she never knew existed. And Eric Hale realized with sinking certainty that the rescue mission had never been about saving someone else. It had been fate leading them to save her. Eric held Lyra tightly as the last flicker of the princess's hologram faded, leaving the chamber drowned in a trembling silence that felt heavier than any weapon. Lyra's breath broke in shivers against his chest, her fingers curling into his coat as though something inside her had cracked so deeply it might never mend again. The truth Ariel had revealed still echoed between them, reshaping everything that had brought them to this moment. She wasn't a maid hiding guilt. She wasn't a human girl clinging to memories of a lost friend. She was heir. She was royalty, a child of a throne buried by war and deceit. And the entire galaxy was already shifting in response. The conduits along the chamber walls hummed louder, lights trembling in chaotic pulses as the building reacted to the hunter vessel outside. Acria moved like a cornered animal, her throat pulsing sharp red patterns of alarm. The moment her lineage awakened, the hunters felt it, she whispered. The galactic thread has recognized the rightful heir. Every faction tied to her dynasty will sense the shift. Eric tightened his hold around Lyra. Meaning what? Acria's gaze met his with grim certainty. Meaning civil war, human hail. The air grew colder, vibrating with a distant rumble. The unmistakable roar of engines entering atmosphere. Not one ship, not two, but dozens. Lyra flinched as the vibrations grew harsher, each tremor pulling at the emotional thread inside her like a blade scraping bone. They're coming for her, Acria continued. All of them. The hunters want her dead. Rival royal lines want her captured. And the protective fleets, if they arrive, will rip apart this entire planet to secure the heir. Lyra trembled violently. I never asked for this. I never wanted a crown. Eric brushed her cheek with a steady hand, his touch grounding her even as the world outside spun toward chaos. Wanting it doesn't matter anymore. You're the key to a throne that never should have fallen, and they won't stop coming. The corridor ceiling shuddered under impact, dust drifting down as metal beams groaned with pressure. Something massive landed on the roof above them, heavy enough to warp the floor under their feet. Acria hissed. The thread cutter is approaching. If they sever your bond, the royal fleets will believe the heir is dead and choose a new ruler. The galaxy will fracture into bloodlines and wars that could last centuries. Eric finally understood the scale of the storm Lyra had been born into. She wasn't just someone the hunters wanted, she was someone entire sectors needed. Someone whose death could ignite a war so catastrophic humans would be dragged into it whether they wanted to or not. Lyra clutched her head, gasping as another spike of pain shot through her. They're pulling harder. I feel Ariel weakening. I feel something inside me waking. I don't know how to stop it. Eric knelt with her, holding her face gently between his hands, forcing her eyes to stay focused on him instead of the pain. Listen to me, Lyra, you don't face this alone. She shook her head desperately. You shouldn't be here, sir. They'll kill you because of me. They'll blame humanity if I'm taken. Please let me go. Please don't let the galaxy burn because of me. Eric leaned closer, his voice low and fierce. I didn't choose this war, but I choose you. A shockwave tore through the chamber before she could answer, the far wall bursting inward as armored hunters pushed through with weapons that crackled with forbidden energy. Their masks glowed with symbols of annihilation, symbols Eric had only seen in classified human war archives. One of the hunters raised a device shaped like a serrated crown, vibrating with a piercing. Painfully, the weight of her words pressing into him like a truth he wasn't ready for. He reached up and brushed his thumb across her cheek, wiping away a tear that felt heavier than blood. You won't lose me, he murmured. Not unless you ask me to walk away. Her eyes widened, hope flickering and dying in the same breath. But you're human. This is a galactic throne, a life of war and politics and ancient enemies. Then let them come, Eric said, voice low and fierce. I've seen war, I've seen power. I've lost more than most humans ever will. What I haven't done is walk away from someone who needed me. Lyra's breath hitched sharply, her fingers gripping his coat as though afraid he might vanish. Before either could speak again, the building groaned with a violent shudder, the roof tearing open as a massive claw-like arm of the hunter vessel punched through the structure, showering them in sparks. Soldiers immediately formed a shield wall, their energy shields flaring under the pressure of the descending cutter unit. Acria stumbled backward, horror flooding her glowing eyes. No, that's not a normal cutter. That's a royal severance engine. Eric frowned, pulling Lyra behind him instinctively. What does it do? Acria swallowed hard, her voice hollow. It doesn't sever the emotional thread. It severs the bloodline. It erases her claim entirely, wipes her lineage from history. If they succeed, the galaxy will believe her line is extinct. All rival dynasties will go to war to claim the empty throne. Lyra gasped, her hands flying to her throat as the thread inside her pulsed violently. They're already pulling, she whispered, her knees buckling. It feels like they're tearing something out of me. Eric caught her before she hit the ground, cradling her against him as her breathing grew strained, her pulse flickering irregularly under his fingertips. Stay with me, he whispered urgently. Lyra, look at me, not the pain. Her eyes fluttered open, unfocused and shimmering with tears. I'm trying. It feels like drowning in light. Above them, soldiers fired volley after volley, but the severance engine continued descending, its crimson glow intensifying, bathing the chamber in a hellish light. A royal commander stepped forward, his voice booming over the chaos. We cannot stop that device from here. Human hail, you must move the air. The bond between you stabilizes her emotional thread. Eric didn't fully understand the science, but he didn't need to. He simply tightened his grip around Lyra, lifting her into his arms as she trembled violently. Hold on to me, he whispered. She did, her fingers clutching his shirt with a desperation that broke him open inside. The commander guided them toward a secondary exit, but the moment they stepped into the corridor, a shockwave slammed them all against the walls. The severance engine ignited, unleashing a pulse of crimson energy that rippled outward like a collapsing star. The air shook, the walls cracked, and every royal soldier staggered as their crests flickered. Lyra screamed, soft but agonized. her body arching painfully as the energy tore at her lineage. Her pulse weakened, her breaths fading into shallow gasps. Eric held her tighter, shielding her from falling debris, whispering fiercely, "Don't you give up on me, Lyra, don't you dare." Her tears streamed down her face, shimmering in the dying light. "I can't. I'm slipping. Sir, I'm sorry. Don't apologize," Eric whispered, voice breaking for the first time. "Just stay with me." Royal soldiers staggered around them, the commander shouting orders through flickering comms. Acria knelt beside Lyra, her voice desperate. "Human Hail, listen to me. The thread is failing. The only thing keeping her alive is her bond to you." Eric leaned close, forehead touching Lyra's, his voice trembling as the world shook around them. "Then take everything you need from me," he whispered. "Strength, breath, hope. Whatever keeps you here." Lyra's fingers curled weakly around his, her eyes fluttering open just enough for him to see the reflection of fire and fear within them. "Don't let me vanish," she breathed, barely audible. "I won't," Eric promised, holding her as the sky above the city split open under the force of fleets arriving from every corner of the galaxy. The war for the throne had begun, and Lyra Hale's life, her legacy, hung by a thread only Eric could hold together as the universe prepared for the moment she would rise, or be erased forever. The sky above them had become a burning tapestry of fate, fleets clashing in spirals of blue fire and crimson ruin. The war for a forgotten throne unfolding above Earth like a prophecy carved into the stars. Eric held Lyra against him as the Severance engine's crimson wave continued tearing at her lineage, each pulse draining the warmth from her skin, each tremor stealing a breath from her lungs. She was fading, too fast, too silently, too completely. They're willing to break treaties, violate human space, threaten thousands of innocent lives, all because I refuse to be their puppet. Her voice cracked, the weight of her choices pressing into her like a crushing gravity. She pressed a hand to her chest, her aura flickering wildly again, unstable, raw, responding to the escalating terror around her. "I didn't want this," she whispered, her throat tightening. "I didn't want to cause a war. I didn't want to be the reason your people bleed." Rylan stopped, turning her gently to face him, his hands cupping her cheeks with a tenderness that contradicted the fury simmering beneath. His calm, "Look at me," he said softly, yet with unshakable command. Her breath hitched as his eyes held hers. "None of this is your fault." She blinked hard, fighting tears. "But I ran and they followed. I hid and they escalated. I tried to disappear, and instead I dragged you into a conflict that could destroy everything you've built." He shook his head slowly, his thumb brushing a stray tear before it could fall. "Lyra, listen, they were willing to do this long before you ever fled. Their desperation didn't begin with you, it led them to you, but you are not the cause." His words softened her breath, but the fear remained, pressed deep into her bones like a shadow that refused to lift. "Rylan," she whispered, "if they attack the Solace again, if the Council denies responsibility, humanity will retaliate, and that retaliation could spiral into something far worse." He took a quiet breath, steady, controlled, but Lyra sensed the storm beneath it, the war waiting behind his restraint. "Then let it spiral," he murmured, not with recklessness, but with the conviction of someone who had lived through too many injustices. Sometimes empires need to be reminded of the consequences of their arrogance. The station shuddered again, a deep reverberation rolling through the walls as the hunter ship powered its weapons once more, this time bypassing warnings, dismissing treaties, ignoring Rylan's command like a declaration of pure defiance. Lyra's heart lurched painfully. They're preparing a full disabling strike. If they fire at the station again, systems will collapse, people will die. Rylan's expression changed then, the gentle protector replaced by the man the galaxy whispered about in fear, his voice lowering to a tone that felt like a final verdict. "Then they leave me no choice." He tapped a command on his wrist console, and a deep hum resonated through the station floor, the voice of the Solace awakening fully, ready to intervene, ready to protect its commander with the devastating efficiency it was built for. Lyra grabbed his arm, her grip trembling but determined. "Rylan, please, don't let this become a massacre." Her eyes glowed softly, her aura shimmering as emotion broke through her fear. "Your ship is too powerful. One wrong move and the Council will brand you a war criminal. They'll twist the story. They'll use me as the excuse to start a galactic conflict." He turned to her again, the fury in his posture softening only for her. "Leary, I told you, they crossed the line first." She shook her head urgently, stepping closer. "But we can still stop it from burning the entire galaxy, Rylan. I don't want blood on your hands because of me." Her words cracked, her voice trembling with raw emotion, and something inside him pulled taut, something deep and painfully human, a protective force that felt older than any fleet or empire. He reached out, gripping her shoulders gently. "Leary, if I have to choose between war and losing you, I will choose war every time." The honesty in his voice stole her breath, her aura pulsing with a brightness that frightened her, overwhelmed her, touched something inside her she didn't know how to name. She opened her mouth to speak, but a violent explosion of sound cut her off, the hunter ship releasing its first strike, a disabling blast that hit the station's outer shielding with enough force to send shockwaves ripping through every deck. Ceiling tiles shattered, lights ruptured, people screamed. The station tilted sharply as stabilizers failed. Rylan wrapped his arms around her before she could fall, shielding her body with his own as debris rained down around them. She clung to him, feeling the terrifying power of the blast pass through the structure like a furious storm. Alarms blaring with a pitch that scraped against the nerves in her skull. And then silence, a deep, suffocating silence that followed only the most catastrophic impacts. Leary lifted her head slowly, her chest heaving, her eyes wide with horror. "They fired?" she whispered, her voice a fractured thread. "They actually fired on a human station. Rylan, they started it. They killed the treaty?" Rylan rose slowly, lifting her with him. His jaw clenched so tightly she could feel the fury radiating off him like heat. The Solace began to move, its engines igniting. Thread that bound her to her own bloodline flickered like a dying star. Royal soldiers fought to shield them, but their crests dimmed with every pulse, their armor cracking as ancient protections faltered. Acria knelt beside Lyra, her voice breaking. "We are losing her. The Severance engine is rewriting her existence faster than her body can resist." Lyra's fingers twitched weakly against Eric's chest, her breath so faint it barely stirred the air. "Sir, I don't want to disappear. Not like this." Eric's heart tightened painfully, an ache that felt carved from the deepest part of him. He brushed a trembling hand through her hair, bending his forehead to hers. "You're not disappearing, Lyra. Not while I'm breathing." A violent tremor shook the building as the Severance engine sent out another pulse. Ripping cracks through the walls, shattering the floors, royal soldiers staggered, one collapsing to the side with a fading crest. Acria looked up sharply as her throat flared with terrified light. "Human Hail, listen carefully. The emotional thread between you and the heir is the only anchor left. If you deepen the bond, if you stabilize her identity, you can hold her in existence long enough for the royal fleets to destroy the engine." Eric stared at her, breath shaking. "Deepen the bond how?" Acria hesitated, fear and awe flickering across her features. "You must declare her fate. A royal heir cannot be erased while someone claims her future openly. It's an ancient principle, older than her dynasty, older than the war, older than most laws in the galaxy. Her destiny must be spoken by someone whose heart has already tied itself to hers." Eric looked down at Lyra, her fading pulse echoing weakly against his wrist. Her half-open eyes searching his face with fear and longing and an unbearable softness. "I'm not royalty," he whispered to Acria. "I'm not a prophet, I'm just human," Acria interrupted gently. "And humans carry a kind of conviction the galaxy has never understood. The thread responds to feeling, not titles." The ground quaked again as the roof tore open, the Severance engine descending fully now, its crimson glow bathing everything in a deathlight meant to erase worlds. Eric cupped Lyra's face with both hands, lifting her just enough so she could look at him. Her tears shimmered in the red glow, fragile and heartbreakingly human. "Lyra," he whispered, voice breaking completely. Look at me. Her gaze steadied just slightly, drawn by the warmth in his voice, the certainty in his touch. You said you were afraid of losing yourself, he murmured. Afraid your past would erase your present, but listen to me. Your identity isn't only in your blood, it's in every moment you survived, every kindness you chose, every time you carried pain without letting it harden you. A tear rolled down her cheek, her lips trembling. I don't want to die. You won't, he said, his voice deepening with a force he didn't know he had. Not while fate has a place for you beside me. Her breath stilled for a moment, caught between fear and a hopeful ache. And that was enough. Eric lifted her gently, pressing his forehead against hers, his voice rising through the collapsing chamber, strong and steady. I claim her destiny, he declared, each word vibrating like a pulse of light through the air. Lyra Hale is heir, living and whole, bound not to death but to the future she deserves. Her life continues, her lineage endures, and her throne awaits her return. The Severance engine hesitated, its crimson glow flickering, as if confused by the power of a human's voice daring to shape a royal fate. Acria gasped as the emotional thread between Eric and Lyra flared with new energy, gold and white weaving together like reborn starlight. Lyra inhaled sharply, a breath full and warm and alive. As the bond snapped back into stability, her pulse surged beneath Eric's fingers, her eyes widening as strength returned to her body in trembling waves. The chamber filled with light, not crimson, not burning, but a brilliant gold that burst outward like a shield formed from pure will. The Severance engine shrieked as its energy struck the golden barrier, recoiling violently, its structure cracking under the force of a power no machine had been built to withstand. Above them, the royal fleet unleashed a coordinated beam of blue-gold light, striking the engine dead center. The machine shattered, detonating in a burst of stardust that scattered across the sky. Royal soldiers collapsed in relief, their fading crests reigniting with their rightful heir's survival. Lyra sagged into Eric's arms, exhausted but breathing, alive, whole, her identity no longer flickering but burning with renewed clarity. She looked up at him with tears trailing down her cheeks, but her voice held steady warmth. You saved me, with just your words. Eric smiled faintly, brushing his thumb across her cheek. Not just words, Lyra, a promise. She pressed her forehead to his, her fingers curling against his chest, her voice trembling with gratitude and something deeper. I want you with me, wherever this destiny leads. Outside, the warring fleet stilled as the royal crest ignited the sky, a symbol reborn, announcing to the galaxy that their true heir lived. The universe shifted, policies, alliances, ancient conflicts rewriting themselves in real time, all because a hidden heir chose to breathe again. And at the center of that cosmic change stood a human billionaire holding the girl who once thought she belonged to dust and silence. Now she belonged to destiny, to a throne, to a future carved from both suffering and hope, to a galaxy on the edge of peace. And, quietly, undeniably, she belonged beside him, as the next chapter of their shared fate began under the light of a reborn royal star.